Hey everyone, today I wanted to talk to you about the Sony XAV-9000ES and what the tuning process was like in my own vehicle using the graphic EQ, the parametric EQ, and the time alignment. Check it out. Well, it's been a couple months and I'm still absolutely loving this Sony receiver and rediscovering all of my old music again for the first time. It's fantastic. Each day I get in this car and drive it, I look forward to listening to the stereo. I think for a lot of people, that's a way to de-stress. It is, at least for me. I turn it up and I sort of turn everything else off in my head. And that's one of the reasons car stereo is so important to me. And I think there's a lot of people that are the same way. You're in your car for so many hours a day, a week, a month. And for a lot of people, that's their personal time where they can sort of defrag their brain. When I first got it installed, like so many things at the shop, just didn't have a lot of time to spend on it, so I just did a really quick EQ by ear. And eventually, John and I made some time on the weekend to come in and do an RTA tune with the microphone, pink noise, and actually get into this parametric EQ, which I want to show you today. If you were like me and you kind of went in and did a quick adjustment, turned on the vinyl processor, and then you sit down and you're like, okay, I'm gonna actually go into this parametric EQ now, and we're gonna set this up. You'll notice when you first go to adjust it, it's gonna give you this little warning. And that's because Sony wants you to start with the parametric EQ to do those major cuts. For example, if you need to make an extremely narrow cut, if there's really just one particular frequency that is really peaked out, you can go in and you can make it super narrow with your Q factor adjustment, or you can leave it pretty wide. You can either use the controls right on the screen here to pick your frequency, or you can drag. I think it's actually easier to use this because then if you get one of these in-between frequencies, it's kind of a pain in the ass to get it back. So I'm just gonna reset that. I like using that, unless you can see that it's slightly over or under that, which is not unlike what you're going to have with a DSP. This is very similar to what John would do with the Helix software in his own vehicle with the V8 DSP, or when we install one of the match amplifiers. This is the kind of adjustment and fine-tuned control that you're going to have, but it is only 8 bands. One thing that John kept saying is, oh, I wish I had more bands, I wish I had more bands, I need more bands to tweak here. You really want to focus on the ones that need the severe cuts and take note of what frequencies are in the 14-band graphic EQ that you have available if you need, versus those frequencies that aren't in there. Use them here in the parametric. And between the two, that's going to give you a lot of control and flexibility. And it is per channel, so you can adjust this, or you really have to adjust it per channel. That's kind of the one thing that I thought was a pain in the butt, is you do have to go channel by channel, whereas with the DSP software, you can link channels together. You know, if you want to do your front left and right together, you can do that. If you want to do your rears together, you can do that. But with this, you're going channel by channel, which is going to be more accurate, but depending on how much time you have, it does take more time. So, but that's cool. That level of adjustment and control is awesome. One thing that you do have to be aware of, though, is when you are doing this, you kind of have to be in the car while you're playing that pink noise. We do recommend using ear protection if you are going to do an RTA tune with this particular stereo, because pink noise, it is pretty harsh. In my car, and possibly in your vehicle, depending on how you have this set up, I'm not running active in front. I do have a passive crossover between my mid-range and tweeter. So it's impossible to get the time alignment perfect. Now, if you wanted to run actively with this head unit, you could. You can go into your speaker configuration and you can tell the system that you're just doing a front two-way and subwoofer, and then you will have that individual time alignment per channel. But in my car, I do have rear fill. I like it. I'm cool with just running traditional front and rear setup and a subwoofer. One of the limitations not having a DSP is I don't actually have a speaker level adjustment for this channel. So even though we have the time alignment dialed in, I hear a lot more of this just because I'm so much closer to it. And in other head units, I think like Alpine.
Even the Kenwood.
Oh, even on Kenwoods, you can go in and you can
There's
actually
page, right?
adjust
in your old one.
the output of that individual channel and the head unit, but we can't find that in here. You have
just have balance control in this.
It's not anything that's in the EQ.
So I would go.
So we were using
1 to 2.
The balance fader basically to try to lower the output a little bit on that left channel.
There you go.
So that's just one limitation. We did measure basically from the tweeter because that's kind of what I'm hearing first. And it sounded great. My soundstage was perfectly centered. Everything was super smooth. Bass was even tighter. I was very happy until I drove home. And that's the difficulty about doing an audio system in a car, is you have these other factors you have to contend with. I'm driving a 2014 two-door Jeep Wrangler. This thing has no insulation because, you know, we haven't taken the time to sound dampen the floors and the doors. It can be done. I do have the hard top, but I have a soft top insert. And I have your typical Jeep tires that make a lot of noise. Once I actually got driving on the road, I was actually really disappointed. There was some phasing issues going on. So first thing I did was turn off the time alignment. I really don't need it in my car because of the speaker placement. I think it's perfect the way it is. And then I had to kind of go back and add a little bit more because too much was cut. These competing frequencies with the road noise were drowning out that vibrancy that I had initially. This is one of the reasons I highly recommend sound dampening to all of my clients that are doing a very high-end audio system. It really does make a difference. I show them this little demonstration, this drop test. This is just a regular piece of sheet metal similar to what you're going to find in your vehicle. And then this is the same thing with just a little bit of Dynamat Extreme. It just completely changes the resonance of the panel and helps to cut down on those external forces that will affect the sound quality in your car audio system. It's not very much. That little material makes a big difference. So I finally got it the way I want it for my car, but if I had the time, I would actually drive around with the mic stand set up in the car and just see what the floor level noise is, so I know exactly what frequencies I'm competing with. But you can see, we got it pretty close to what our like house RTA curve is, with a little bit more in a couple of ranges. And again, that's just to contend with what was getting lost while I was actually on the road. When you're doing this, and you're looking at the frequency response you're getting, assuming you have a car that's well insulated and you're not going to be competing with a ton of outside road noise and wind noise, you want the RTA curve to look kind of like a lounge chair. At least that's what our target is in our shop. And that's something that John has had with him since he used to do sound quality competitions many, many years ago. That was just kind of the target curve that they would use. It's kind of always what we've used here, and always had great results.
If you want to get really detailed and get into a really smooth curve, it's going to be a little bit harder to do with a 7-band parametric.
8-band.
8-band parametric.
You'd really want like double that, right?
You want, yeah, I think the Helix has 31 bands per channel. And it makes it a lot easier. With an 8-band parametric, you really just want to get to the high points, smooth them down, and it's pretty much all you can do.
But what you did do made a significant difference in the sound quality.
Absolutely.
It really refined it, it dialed in, the bass is much tighter, everything is much smoother, and I personally probably don't need the DSP. I mean, it's something we'll probably do at some point just because this is what we do and it's fun to have.
Right.
But that head unit on its own has some really good tools built into it to really fine tune it.
Oh, it definitely does. I mean, you can shape it the way you want it, but when you have a DSP, you can do amp gains and everything right there on the software itself. You can choose your different type of crossover, whether it be Basil, Butterworth, all the other ones. That makes a difference in blending the woofer into the fronts.
How sharp the crossover is, or?
Not only the sharpness, but the actual curve of the crossover. Like Linkwitz Riley is
The overlap.
basically, it's 3 dB down at the crossover point, I believe, on each, the high pass and the low pass, so that it should equal to 0. But that doesn't always work out in a car, especially when the woofer is far away from the mid-range. Butterworth gives you a bump at the crossover point. So it's nice to play with and listen to the 4 different ones that they offer.
That picture I have on the old audio control RTA,
Yep.
that you call it like you want it to look like a lounge chair.
Yeah.
Is that like an industry thing? Is that something that you go by?
That was from the old IASCA challenges.
The sound quality?
The sound quality, yeah. That's how we used to judge
Okay.
the EQ curve.
What was that, back in the 90s?
Yep,
Okay.
back in the 90s. But I mean, they still do now. If you go to the software I was just playing with, the audio control, and you go to the house curve, it's basically like that.
Oh.
A little bit of a dip in the middle, and then a little bit of a raise on the top end, the mid top end, and then a slope at the very top. But I mean, that's going to be personal preference. Like in a car, I definitely want a rolled off top end,
Yep.
and I definitely want to bump in, from
Lower.
80 on down. But you don't want anything more than like a 3 dB per octave between frequencies, because then you can really hear the difference. Like when I had to lower your 40 and 50 hertz and 60 hertz because it was drowning out, the really low end.
Right.
Which
right.
you have.
Which I noticed it after I listened to it. That's why I was saying
Sounds
it's much
great.
tighter.
It hits hard, but now it's a much harder hit, and there's actually low bass extension as well.
The other thing I noticed is I have to put the volume up a lot more, and that's because your method is always to cut, right?
Yeah, for the most part.
Rather
yes.
than boost.
You can boost, it's okay, but you don't want to boost more than like 6 dB, and that's only if you have to.
All right.
Yeah, you want to cut it so that it's nice. There's no real peaks. You just want to take the peaks out, that's all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
After every audio system that John does, where he's using a DSP or he's doing one of these fine tunes with RTA or doing an elaborate sound system, he always has me come in and take a listen. We kind of do some additional equalization after the fact. So that's where you get into this. After you've set your parametric EQ, you can kind of go in and listen and say, okay, yeah, I need a little bit more top end. I'm missing a little bit of detail on the top end. Okay, let's bump it up a little bit there. Or you know what? It's a little bit harsh in frequency. There's a little bit too much 5K. Let's take that down just a notch. And then we sit and we listen with a bunch of different types of music and say, okay, yes, that's right. There's a lot of back and forth doing this type of setup, and it can depend on how you're feeling. If you have allergies, if you have a sinus cold, all of that stuff's going to affect your ears, and it's good to have some other people to bounce what you've done off of it, and then even kind of like put it away. Okay, so if you've spent a couple hours on this, put it away, come back to the next day, take a fresh listen, and retweak if needed. One of my complaints is in the custom EQ on both the 14 band and the 8-band parametric, you only have 2 presets. I wish it had 4, because so much of this I'm doing while I'm driving and I'm trying to like A/B compare between the 2. And finally I ended up just like deleting everything that he had done, which kind of broke my heart to delete it, but I had to in order to compare it to how I was when I first had it installed. The RTA is really just there to kind of guide you, but everybody's tastes are going to be slightly different. I like a much meatier mid-range. I really want to hear those heavy guitar riffs. So what I like on my EQ is going to be a little bit different than what John likes on his EQ. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is all a very subjective process. When you get into this kind of really fine tuning, I can't tell you how to set the EQ in your car, just because there's so many different variables besides the cabin conditions, your particular taste in music. Every application is unique, but having this level of flexibility to fine tune it is ideal for anybody that's very particular about their car audio system. But the trick, if you are going to use that parametric EQ, is to know what those floor level noises are in your particular vehicle that you're competing with, and use that parametric EQ to make those major cuts where there's really too much of one particular frequency or too very little of another, because you really do have the ability to adjust how much you're adding or how much you're taking away. And in general, we want to take away. So if you can, think of it that way when you're looking at your RTAs. Okay, where can I make my cuts to really kind of get this looking almost like a lounge chair? The lounge chair look on the RTA is very smooth to the ears, but if you haven't addressed the cabin noise levels, it can sound a little bit thin. You need time to do this. It really takes a lot of time to dial in an EQ, whether it's a graphic EQ, parametric EQ, working on a head unit, working on a DSP. You really need to set aside time to do it properly. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you did, please hit that like and subscribe, and I will see you all next time.